All right, class. First off, is always a good day. I'm glad you're here. So today we are going to be looking at basically how power transferred from a king, a monarch who's all powerful, has all the power, to basically where we're at now, where the power of the government comes from the people. Okay, so we're going to look at how it transitioned from a single person to the people. Okay, that's what today's lesson's all about. Okay, so you guys are going to analyze the Magna Carta and how it changed the world. You're going to examine the importance of the Petition of Rights, and you're going to create an argument on why the Petition of Rights wasn't enough and that the English Bill of Rights was created. Okay, so let's move on to the warm-up picture. So again, if you have the Google Doc, I would suggest you put that as half the screen and then this YouTube video on the other half. And that way you can just go through as we go through the lecture. Okay, so first question is, what do you see? I think I put on there what are three things that you see. So be sure to answer that. The other one is, what do you think this artist is trying to say? So you have the Magna Carta, you have the Bill of Rights, and you have this thing called habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is this thing where, if I don't know if you ever watched TV shows or crime dramas and movies, stuff like that, where they show you when the person gets arrested, they go to jail, they go before a court, and in front of witnesses, they basically, are told the charges, they make their plea, and then they, get a chance to have bail. That part of being in court out in the open, that is habeas corpus. Basically, you get to go before a judge. You have witnesses around who get to hear what the charges are against you and hear the plea and stuff like that. Because back in the day, the kings could arrest somebody and keep them in jail for however long they wanted. There was no statute of limitations of how long they could keep somebody in jail. So somebody could be arrested and not formally charged and spend their whole life in jail, just because the king wanted it that way, or felt that that person disrespected them or whatever the case may be. So habeas corpus puts an end to that and makes sure that you have a day in court. People get to hear what you're being charged with, So there's that. Okay, so if you haven't finished writing your responses, pause the video because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so I'm sure you guys know that back in the day there was like kings and queens and stuff like that. That was during the Dark Ages, all right? And what happened was basically the kings and queens and noble people had the most power. It was especially the king, what they said went. And there's no way you can go around it. Now, we talked before about the divine right, and that's the time when this was happening. So a lot of people thought, that their king or queen or whatever was either chosen by God or that they were kind of related to God in a sense, and that what they did was okay because they're God's choice, so they're related to God. But as time went on, so people were like, you know what? No, that doesn't sound right. This person is corrupt, And so what happened is in 1215, King John was basically forced to sign the Magna Carta. It also has another name, the Great Charter. Basically the people had enough, not only the poor people, but the noble people, the people who had the influence, had the money, and things like that. They had enough of him. And they basically forced him to sign the Magna Carta. Right, and that's what that document is right there. Now here's the thing. Originally, the Magna Carta was meant only for the noble people. So it gave them rights. But the wording of the Magna Carta, it didn't say just noble people. It didn't say the rights of protection of unjust punishment goes to the noble people. It said the people. So as time went on, some scholars and law interpreters took that as, well, it means everybody, not just the top people. It's on paper, it says the people. The poor people are people of that country. So these rights fall for them too. So what the Magna Carta did is protected from unjust punishment. So the king couldn't just arrest you, put you in jail because they didn't like your face. They couldn't do that. Um, they protected you from loss of life, loss of liberty, which is freedom, and loss of property, except according to law. So if you killed somebody, they might kill you, capital punishment. Um, if you killed somebody and they're like, well, we're going to put you in jail, that's the loss of your freedoms. And the last one, property. Let's say you don't pay your taxes and you're like, well, I just didn't have the time or the money and things like that. They could be like, well, here's the thing, we're taking your stuff to pay for those taxes because under the law you have a certain amount of time and things like that. So, no, but again, that's like back then stuff. So they could take that kind of stuff. Okay, so it had to be by the law. It's just gonna be the king just couldn't. I'm gonna take someone's property just cause. Couldn't do that. So about 400 some years later, Charles the First basically was like, you know what, I'm the king. I can do what I want. That that stuff that was for the kings back in the day. I'm me now, things like that. And basically, he dissolved Parliament, which was the voice of the people. He placed troops in people's homes. Basically, they had to take care of them, make sure those soldiers got to eat, that they have a place to sleep, and it all came from the pocket of the people. The government didn't pay for any of it. And lastly, they placed some areas under martial law. So that means the military was in the town. That they had like a curfew. People were restricted what they could and couldn't do. Um, and it was just like, why? Because he could. The king wanted to. He felt tried to show his power, show his oomph. Now, as time went on, the people got upset, got very, very angry, including the nobles, and they they basically confronted him. And he was like, "Okay, okay, how about this? I give you back your parliament. You happy now?" And they were like, "No, that's not all we want. We want rights on paper." And that's where they forced him to sign the Petition of Rights, which is that document right there on the side. Basically, this is what it said. The king couldn't collect taxes, um, basically without the parliament's consent. So he couldn't be like, "Oh, I want to collect taxes on people." Well, why? I want to build a new house. No. I want to collect taxes to give food to the poor. Okay, we're going to vote on that. You know, uh, so the parliament got to choose whether the king could tax or not. The king couldn't imprison people without just cause. So he couldn't arrest somebody just because he didn't like their face, he didn't like what they said about him. Okay, there has to be a reason. Murder, theft, assault, stuff like that. Okay. No more housing the troops without the permission of the owner. Now, if the owner said, "Yeah, the soldier can stay here," that's fine then. They gave permission, but they couldn't force people to take care of soldiers. And lastly, the king could not declare martial law unless the country was at war. Okay. Unless they were legitimately at war, no, oh, we think soldiers are coming this way. No. If that's the case, then you send those soldiers out there then. They are not going to be here, you know, taking over this town. So here's your first question. Which of the four rights do you feel is the most important and why? That the king couldn't collect taxes unless Parliament said yeah? He couldn't imprison people without a real cause or a real reason. People didn't have to take care of soldiers on their own expense, Or lastly, people or that the king couldn't declare martial law unless there was actually a war going on. So which one do you feel was the most important and why? All right, so go ahead, write out your thoughts. Press the pause video because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so here's the thing. In 1688, King James II basically was kind of like Charles the First. Was like, oh, I'm the king. What are they going to do to me? I have the power. And Parliament basically said, you think you have power? We can show you power. And they removed him from the throne. All right, they kicked out the king. Now, the next person in line was basically his, I believe it was his nephew, William III, and then his wife, Mary II. William is the one with the brown hair with his hand on his hip. That's him. Now, they are basically told, okay, you're going to be the next king and queen. They have the coronation. They're officially the king and queen. And almost immediately, William and Mary give up their power. Now, I'm not saying they give up all their power as king and queen, but they give up a significant amount of power. And people are like, is this a joke? You know, what's going on here? Are they getting paid for this? You know, or are they doing this as like a, oh, it's only temporary? What's going on here? Because they didn't trust it. Some people were like, what's up? Nobody just gives up power. They did. All right. They gave up their power. That's why this is known as the Glorious Revolution. Because you have to remember, a lot of times when people get rights, it's because a war has ended, you know, or or somebody was forced to do it. The king, you know, King John, King Charles, they were forced to sign those petitions and those charters. But William and Mary, nobody forced them. Nobody told them you have to sign this, things like that. They just did. And that was very, very unique at that time. I mean, still to this day, it's like, wow. Okay. So here's my question to you. Why do you think William III and Mary II gave up their power willingly? Why would somebody do that? Why would somebody just say, you know what? My king job has too many powers. I'm going to give them up to the people. Yeah, here you go. Why would he do that? Okay, so pause the video and write your response because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so thing is, next thing comes up is the English Bill of Rights was adopted by Parliament. What it did was it set very clear limits on what the ruler can and cannot do, not just Parliament, but also the king. And one of the first things they put on there was that the power of the government, king and queen, the parliament, that power comes from the people. And without the people, they have no power. So that's where things get kind of like, oh, yeah, huh? So the king could be like, I want to tax you on this and that. You could try, but yeah, it's not going to work. Okay, so that's one thing. The acknowledgement that the power comes from the people, not from the government. Parliament is needed to suspend laws, levy taxes, and maintain an army. Because again, Parliament makes the laws, but they also have a way to get rid of them. Because some of these laws may look good at first, but as they're practicing them and putting them into effect, they might be discriminating against some people. They might be hurting more than they're actually doing good. So there's quite a bit of things. So they have a right to get rid of those laws. Parliament now has a right to basically collect taxes. It's no longer the king. It's Parliament. They make the decision on whether they should tax more, tax less, things like that. Also, they're in charge of the army because you have to remember the king and queen would basically be like, well, attack this country because, you know, I need more land. Whereas here and now, Parliament, a lot of those people, they might know somebody whose son, daughter, well, not daughter at that time, cousins, things like that would be a soldier. So they would kind of hesitate and think, man, is it really worth sending this soldier to possibly die in? Um, so yeah, no. The next part is very interesting. The king and queen could not interfere with elections or debates. So instead of going around saying, "Oh, you should vote for this guy," he's a really stand-up guy, like giving an endorsement, the king queen couldn't do that because they didn't want like the emperor or the king going, "Oh, hey, I got you elected, so now I want you to do this for me." Make sure I keep my power or I get more power, whatever it may be. Okay. The next one, people have the right to petition the government. So if there's something wrong going on you see with the government, you have the right to say something without fear of they're going to arrest me. They're going to do something to me because I said something bad against the government. That's one of your fundamental rights. You know, that if you see something that the government is doing wrong, you can voice your opinion without fear that they're going to come arrest you, put a black bag over your head, and take you off somewhere. Okay. The right to a fair and speedy trial, because again, like I said earlier, the kings and queens, what they would do is arrest people, keep them in jail for a long time, and when the time was right, I guess they felt, then they might have the trial. Sometimes they never had a trial. But a lot of times what they did is if there was a witness, what they would do is wait because three things are going to happen with the witness. One, they're going to forget what they saw or heard. It might get kind of a little muffled in their memory. Two, they might move away. Or three, they might die. So that's why the king, queen kind of prolonged those trial dates. But the thing is, now, no, you can't do that. The trial is going to be at a certain time, reasonable time, and it's going to be fair. It's not going to be like, oh, you're automatically guilty. No. Okay. And the people are not subject to any type of cruel and unusual punishment. So what they used to do too back in the day is tie rope around people's wrists and legs and have some horses like walk. And that way they would stretch and stretch. And those horses are strong. If you've ever ridden a horse, they can move. But just imagine one barely walking, each one pulling. That's torturous. Okay. Unusual would be like in a container that they had back in the day in the Inquisition time. They had these containers with metal spikes all around, and you basically had to stand still, or else you get stabbed on your head, neck, shoulder, back, legs, whatever. And that's very cruel and unusual. So here's my next question for you. Do you think any president, king, or queen, or any leader today would give up their power? Yes or no, and why? All right, so why do you think this? Why do you think that they would or wouldn't, even just a little bit of power? Why? Why do you think they would or wouldn't? So think of Trump, Trudeau, Queen Elizabeth II, Kim Jong-un, Putin. Would any of them give up any of their power, even a little bit? Yes or no, and why? So go ahead and write that out. Pause the video because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. Now we come to the exit ticket. All right, so remember, answer one of these three questions. 1, how did the Magna Carta change the world? Explain. Second one, why is the Petition of Rights so important? What made it so much more important and better than like the Magna Carta? Third one, why was the English Bill of Rights created if citizens had the Petition of Rights? So why have the English Bill of Rights? Okay, now if you're having any trouble with these questions, go back to them, look at your notes, help yourself out. Okay, so but once you're finished with that, be sure you hit submit on the Google Doc, and that's it. Don't forget, there's a test for you guys. It's put on this week, so get that done. Okay, and that's it. All right, you guys have a good day. You take care and be safe.